I'm Janice Kinghorn, and I'm here with my colleague Ling Shao. We are from Miami University, which is in Oxford, Ohio, not Florida. So we are in the Midwest. And we want to talk to you about a project that we have undertaken. We've been working on it a few years now, how to infuse writing in the economics department. This first slide gives you a link to something the president of the university published, Writing as Thinking. This was published after our project, but it was so poignant because that is one of the things that we learned throughout this project is we are not simply teaching students to write, but you could teach them how to think like an economist through writing. Now, going into this project, we thought that writing looked a bit like this. It's stuff you did in English class, right? Now, we understood, okay, yeah, economists write papers and all, but when you think about how to teach students to write and infusing writing in the curriculum, I think most of our faculty had an idea that this is what we were going to be doing. Worrying about what the font was, what the format was, what the heading was, things that were not economics. Another worry that our faculty had when we talked about infusing writing in economics is we would spend a whole lot of time doing things like this, taking our red pen and correcting grammar, correcting punctuation, and we got a lot of, we don't know how to do this. Don't they learn this in English? We're economists. Can't we worry about the economics and have someone else teach them how to write? What we learned through this project, and our project was undertaken with the help of the Writing Center at the university, is that we already teach students how to communicate in written form. We hadn't in the past thought about it explicitly as writing because it looked a little different than what happens in English class, and we talk about it a little different. For example, the classic supply and demand diagram speaks to us. It's written communication, and it tells us a story more clearly to someone trained in reading it than could be told using a paragraph and a narrative. It has a particular grammar to it. It has a particular implied audience to it, and it has certain stylistic elements. And you all probably recognize this when you teach principles, and you have to tell students, okay, indicate which is the first demand curve and which is the second demand curve, so we know which way it shifts, right? And so there's elements of this picture that are written communication, but look very different than the writing students would do in an English class. Another example of a form of writing you might see in an economics class, but not an English class. Tables, figures, diagrams, of course, we use them to clearly communicate. And in class, we have a lot of emphasis on how to properly use these tools. We just never previously thought about them as teaching students to write. Another example. This is something that would be understandable to someone trained in economics because we understand the conventions. We know how to read this. It's presented in a very standard format. But again, our students don't know this because they haven't been taught to write in this way. Let's see. Okay. Another example of how we write in economics comes from our econometrics class. This was a really interesting project one of our faculty came up with, using econometrics to help decide which college to apply to. It required standard econometrics and an empirical analysis yet it resulted in a letter to a general audience, to somebody that doesn't understand the details of econometrics and needed a particular result. So it was a writing project our econometrics faculty came up with. This example comes from intermediate microeconomics. It's a standard problem like many of us do in principles and intermediate theory, but the difference here is the emphasis on it had to be clearly written. Students had to explain why. It wasn't good enough to simply solve the problem, but there was an emphasis on writing to explain. Again, writing as thinking. Here's another example. A true-false question can go beyond true-false to explain your answer and explaining how economists would write to explain. Write with evidence, and that evidence generally takes the form of economic logic explained in words, graphs, or mathematical argument. So an emphasis on how we communicate. Ling, I'll stop sharing and you want to take over some more examples?
Sure, thanks, Janice. Let me share my screen. Writing in large classes presents some additional challenges in grading and offering timely feedback. One solution is to craft, small but impactful writing assignments. Another solution is we can break up a big end of semester project into smaller chunks to be completed throughout the semester. So our faculty has used assignments such as macro forecasting game and country report project, and online discussions such as this one on Uber to encourage economic writing and thinking in large enrollment classes. Okay, and next, Janice, she will be again talking about some more specific lessons that we have learned from teaching writing in economics. Janice, okay, back to you again.
Okay, so here are some of our takeaways. I know we are running out of time. Audience awareness is so important and something our faculty had not at all thought about. That in every assignment, it is so important that the student understands what is their intended audience, why is it important, why is this piece of writing important for their intended audience, and what is the level of background the intended audience has, because of course that would dictate how technical it is. The second takeaway is the details that you have to teach them about how economists communicate. Okay, for example, economists describe by using graphs and tables. They need to know this, and our faculty just took that for granted and didn't realize that it's something you had to teach students because they didn't automatically know it. And it was something that certainly an English professor could not have taught because the English department doesn't know how economists communicate. Here are some ways economists communicate that we had to teach students how to construct because they didn't automatically know that. There wasn't another department that taught how to construct tables that spoke like these do. Okay, so key takeaways. Clear writing is clear thinking. So we're not just teaching about writing at the expense of economics, but when we teach writing, we are teaching them how to clearly think about economics. Number two, we had expectations that students would write like an economist without realizing that we had to first explicitly teach it. Number 3, elements of writing instructions are simply elements of good instruction. Again, it wasn't going to take time away from teaching economics. It was simply reinforcing their learning in economics. And number 4, economists have conventions that are different from other different disciplines. And we needed to explicitly teach students what those conventions are and why they're important to us. For example, we use evidence. And if they were going to write for an audience as an economist, they also needed to use evidence to back up what they were saying. So those are our feedbacks. I know I went through that very quickly, but please put your questions in there because we love to talk about this work.
Okay.
Thank you.